John, how's it going, buddy?
Mr. Miller, sir, how's it going?
Yes, I'm doing well. So we're going to dive into dependents, accompanying and non-accompanying today. What do you say?
Sure, that sounds like a plan.
How about you lead this off, buddy?
Okay, so everybody, what is a dependent? Let's classify what it is. So a dependent is basically a minor child or a spouse who is, so we're talking like nuclear family, which if you were to make an application for permanent or even temporary residence, is considered under Canadian immigration regulations as a dependent. Are they coming with you on this application? Um, I think we'll just narrow it down a bit, and we'll talk mostly today about dependents on permanent resident applications. But it's safe to say that, okay, so you're applying for permanent residence, you found a program that you're eligible under, you're getting your paperwork together, and then you have to ask yourself, is my spouse and my child, let's just assume for this you have one child, is my spouse and child coming with me to Canada on this application? If yes, you then include the documentation and you complete the forms in the way that and pay the applicable fees, so your dependents can be also issued permanent residence visa when your application is approved. Now, let's consider the corollary to that. I'm coming to Canada as a permanent resident. Let's say I'm being sponsored by my Canadian spouse, but I have a previous relationship. And in that previous relationship, there is a child from that relationship. I have no, what's the word I'm looking for, Brandon? I have no custody of that child. That child is not immigrating with me. Therefore, what do I do? Brandon, what do I do? What do I do in that situation? Do I just go, nah, I'm not going to put the kid on the application. Don't worry about it. Is that something I should do?
Oh, man.
Oh, I know. It's like such a
Here we go.
Pandora's box of.
It's funny when you were speaking there. I was like, oh, there's so many things to say about this. Okay, let's try to keep this structured. So first off, you have to include. So actually, let's take this back even further. One of the goals of the Immigration Act is to keep families together. Okay. So the government is, you're going to have to immigrate as a family. There's some exceptions to that. But to be able to include somebody on an application, they have to be medically examined. And if they're over the age of, as an adult, they have to provide police checks. So they have to be medically and criminally examined. Okay. The medical for sure for everybody. So a lot of times what happens is that people, family structures may have changed and be different. You could have a situation like John reiterated where somebody's remarried, the child's with another spouse, and it's the child is under the custody of that person. And maybe the spouse doesn't want to give them the ability to be able to get the child the medical. And they're like, the child's not coming to Canada with you, the child's with me, whatever. I've dealt with this a few times over the years, and I know that you probably have as well. I've seen some situations where, the spouse was very adamant about the child not going. But, one of the things that I do to counsel my client is that you also have to think about in the future, maybe, if the child's over 18, might want to go to school, might want to come to University of Toronto, you might want to sponsor that child to bring them here to go to UBC or University of Toronto or school in Canada. So you have the ability to do that and not pay international student rates. So, might want to keep that in reserve for later use. Again, it's accompanying versus non-accompanying. Either way you slice it, you have to declare the family members, okay? Because then you've got other things that might lead into misrepresentation. You have to declare the family members. And if you want to keep them as a member of family class, you need to make sure that they're medically and criminally examined. And that's covered under something called R 117.9D under the regulations, the R meaning regulations, which means that they have to be examined prior to the person becoming a permanent resident. Otherwise, they're forever excluded under family class. And you're also opening up yourself to more issues in terms of misrepresentation and whatnot, and that.
I can interject here.
Yeah, please.
I can speak for Brandon too here, guys. We have seen, or we have had colleagues that we work with who've seen the terrible sort of life-shattering consequences of being on the wrong side of this, of people saying, oh, it's not important, I'm just not going to put that person, that child on my application, I'm just not going to provide any information. It really, really can have some terrible consequences. So
yeah,
safe to say, don't do it. And the thing is that, again, we counsel our clients through some pretty difficult situations where you may have a situation where, the child's in the custody of a former spouse overseas. That former spouse is not providing access, is being difficult, is being an obstructionist. There are ways, we can offer advice on how to deal with that, and solutions. I mean, it's important to take into this situation carefully when you're making an application for PR.
Yeah, and I think the easiest thing to add to that is that what I say to clients sometimes when they're faced with that is put your differences with your spouse aside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that is hard in some instances, and you talk about having options for the future for your child, and that's what it basically boils down to. You're not like taking the child and going to Canada and stealing the child away. It's basically just preserving that right to be able to give that child the option later on in the future. And if even over the last couple of years the world we haven't seen changes in the world to understand that having those options open can be quite beneficial depending on how the world is changing and moving. Now, with that said, I want to get back to a little bit, and I want to give you a few more examples and tell you some situations as well that you need to be aware of. So, dependents, they have to be declared on the application. I've seen a number of times where people would make a temporary resident application. I see this a lot. I worked a lot with caregivers over the years as well. They would be dealing with agencies in Hong Kong, let's say, the agencies, or ghost consultants as we call them, would be filling out applications for them, and they're like, oh, you don't have your birth certificate of your child. Oh, it's going to slow it up. Don't worry, leave it off. I've dealt with so many of those. Yeah. So, so they'll come to me, and it's like, you'll review the forms and you'll take a look and you'll be like, why isn't this? Oh, I didn't declare it because it was going to slow my application up. Well, that's kind of, you're signing a form and you've lied on a form. Now that's a misrepresentation. So we have to correct that because it actually is major when it becomes a PR issue. So generally get ahead of that. If that's you and you haven't declared a family member on there, or for instance, maybe you didn't know you had that family member. And I've dealt with that too, where, DNA tests have been used and different things as well, where children will pop up. And I believe actually recently there was some federal court stuff that I saw on that as well in terms of misrepresentation with respect to child being unknown. But anyways, don't want to go down that rabbit hole either. What else? Multiple parents and children from multiple marriages. This gets complicated. Again, you want to make sure that the children are medically examined. You're not taking the children away. I would strongly recommend that you do that and make sure they're part of that. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. Let's throw another layer on this. There has to be a form that's filled out as well if the child is coming and with only one parent. Sometimes this gets pretty interesting, let's say. I've seen people ask for money over the years. Yeah, I'll sign the form. You're going to have to pay me money, which and
it can get ugly. Yeah.
Well, it's just what you're leveraging your child's future based to yourself. So, I I've always struggled with that, but hey, it is what it is.
But we understand. I mean, Brandon and I understand. Most of our colleagues understand. Some family situations just are complicated. They can get
yeah,
complicated, but there
it's
are solutions.
complicated.
There are solutions, and the
There's
one
always a solution, and sometimes that's paying the spouse to sign a paper so you can better the child's future. But anyways, leaving all of that aside, listen, guys, I'll wrap it up with this. If you have children or you have a spouse, they need to be cleared on the application. The other thing I'm going to say too is the spouse might be a common law spouse, and depending on where you
just thinking that, just getting into
I
that.
know
Yeah.
we're in each other's brains all the time. I just literally saw this with a client, and luckily they hadn't cohabitated for a full 12 months. If you have a child together, and this concept of common law cohabitation doesn't really resonate with some areas of the world. Here it's as per Canadian law, and if you have lived with somebody, I've had cases where people, they have a child together, but they actually haven't cohabitated together, so they're actually not common law. But if you've actually have a child, you might think, oh, I'm not married, I don't have to declare them as a spouse. Oh, but if you've lived together for a year, you have that child, guess what? You need to declare that, and that could actually cancel that. And I've seen that come up as well too, and that is not pretty. That's not pretty. So anyways, but the good news is it had a happy ending. So all of that, but yeah, it's complicated. So is there anything else you want to add to that, John? Because I don't want to go on too long with this. I'll sum it up with some tips for people, but did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, you covered the because I wanted to move away just a little bit from children to spouses. So again, there are times where you see people who are just about to put an application in, and you do the math, and you find out they've only been living together 11 months, and so under Canadian law, they're not common law spouse. And just as one small example, that's an easy fix. You say to the clients, wait a month. You put your application in a month, because at that point, you're common law. You can apply for permanent residence, and the accompanying spouse is now an accompanying spouse, and they can be added to the application. But at the 11th month mark, it's two separate individuals under Canadian law.
I'm going to say one other thing in terms of strategy. Under express entry, you can have accompanying and non-accompanying, and if you have the person as non-accompanying, you're still putting them down as your wife. You can actually increase your points.
Yes.
So when I do a consultation, and I know John will be doing the same thing, I actually have geared my spreadsheet so that I have with spouse and without spouse, because I can actually see what the points are looking like for each of those. Because strategically, and it was more important in the days of when those, even still now, every point is a point, it's all important. So you might want to, and I've done this with clients where we'll fill out an express entry application, we'll declare the spouse, but we'll have them as non-accompanying so it doesn't drag the points down, which allows somebody to become a permanent resident and then go back later and sponsor under family class. So there's a lot of different things to know about dependents, but I think I'm going to sum it up as this. There are certain strategies depending on the program for leaving them off or not, as I just cited with that. If you have dependents, they always need to be listed on the application, whether they're coming or not, because that could actually get into complications if you want to sponsor them later, where they will not be allowed. And it could also complicate your application if somebody wants to deem that as a misrepresentation. Also, it can get tricky depending on the family structure. There's a number of different ways that you can do that and get around that. I've seen situations where spouses have been at each other, and cooler heads were allowed to prevail. But other than that, that's about it. You want to make sure that you cover all those bases, and this stuff is also very it's very important. There's one other thing that I want to say too that just popped into my mind. Some people will leave kids off or whatever, or spouses off, because it'll sink their application. and I'm talking about medical inadmissibility or criminal inadmissibility. And I've seen situations over the years where people have, done certain things because they're weighing out, the future and earning power, for instance, if they're in a country where, they can make more money here to be able to support the family. So when you're dealing with dependents, there can be a lot at play. And yeah, it's there's a lot of things to consider. So again, if you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. Everybody's situation is different. And I would urge you to do that and get some professional advice. And no, I'm not sitting here trying to sell you on our services. What I am telling you is that what you do in one application can actually sow the seeds for chaos years down the road.
Yeah.
And I think John and I have both seen instances of that where,
yeah, and they're hard to fix.
And they're very hard to fix too.
Sometimes they can't be fixed.
Yeah, and it's sad when that stuff happens. So, anyways, bit of a note there, John. But anything you want to wrap up with?
No, we're all good. Again, reach out, guys, if you have any questions. We see if we can help where we can.
All right, awesome, John. Take care, buddy. I know you're always doing well out there in BC, but we'll talk to you soon, man.
See you later, Brandon. Take it easy. Bye, everybody.
Take care, bud. Bye, guys. Have a good day.